Yeah, good evening, George.
Good evening.
I'm from the other side completely. I think it's absolutely disgraceful what I've been hearing. Do you not think that a country has the right to defend itself when hundreds of rockets are coming over and they want peace?
How many people died with these hundreds of rockets, Steve?
Well, luckily, they didn't hit the area.
That's right. So luckily they didn't hit the area, and Israel hit back and killed 225 people and wounded 800 others, and most of the people who have been killed or wounded are women and children. I'm not even going to try and touch your heart, Steve, because I already know from your voice that that would be a hard thing to do. So I'm going to ask you a very practical question. Do you think that this attack today has made Israel safer or less safe?
Less safe. It's absolutely disastrous. But the thing is, what are they supposed to do? These rockets are coming over. They warn them and warn them and warn them to stop doing it, and they keep doing it.
Well, 6 months there wasn't a single rocket, Steve.
Well, it's up to the Palestinians.
No, Steve, deal with that point, please. For 6 months there wasn't a single... Steve, please listen to me. There wasn't a single rocket for 6 months. Steve, stop talking for a minute and listen to me. There was 6 months ceasefire until last Wednesday. No rockets were fired. During that time, Israel was condemned by the United Nations on almost a daily basis for its siege and blockade on the Palestinian people, who instead of dying from rockets had begun to die from hunger. Don't you think that that was a pressure cooker waiting to explode, albeit impotently, with hundreds of rockets that didn't hurt a single person?
Well, that's not true today. It hasn't hurt a single person.
No, they didn't. None of the rockets that were fired between the end of the ceasefire and this day, none of them hurt a single person.
Well, that's what's reported, but...
Well, Steve, none of them hurt anyone. You acknowledged that just 2 minutes ago. None of them hurt a single person, but 225 have been killed in an afternoon today. You acknowledged the point, and I'm glad that you did. It was honest of you to do so. Israel is less safe this evening, as are the citizens of Britain and the United States, who are culpable in this crime, than they were before the crime took place, Steve.
I don't think you're listening to me. Why don't you put your efforts in telling the people to stop firing rockets and go for peace, not for war?
But there was a ceasefire for 6 months, and there was no peace. There was just starvation and blockade.
I don't think you're listening. I think
I'm listening. I'm listening.
You're concerned with this, and it's not true.
Steve, I am listening. There was a siege, wasn't there, for 6 months? There was a blockade, or were they...
Because they were concerned about all these suicide bombings.
No, there were no suicide bombings and no rockets for 6 months. Now, unless the United Nations were lying, there was a siege throughout that 6 months that was giving rise to the gravest humanitarian situation in the entire world. So, Steve, I'll ask you again. In that 6 months, in which there were no suicide bombers and no rockets, in which there was a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, why did Israel starve the Palestinians in Gaza?
Could you tell me why during the ceasefire they're hitting rockets continually?
Steve, you say I'm not listening. There was 6 months until last Wednesday in which there were no rockets. There was a ceasefire, Steve.
Rockets coming over continually.
No, there haven't been, Steve. That's just not true. You're either misinformed or you're trying to misinform the audience, and it won't wash, Steve.
I'm not trying to misinform. I'm telling you the truth.
But you're not telling me the truth. There was a 6 month ceasefire, and Israel asked that that ceasefire should continue. If there was no ceasefire, why did Israel denounce Hamas for ending the ceasefire?
The English people, as though everyone thinks as you do, and I can assure you they don't.
Well, no, I know that they don't, Steve, and I didn't even intend to try to touch your heart, for I believe it's made of stone. But at least I got from you an admission that Israel is less safe this evening than it was this morning. And let me add to you, as you bring in the English people, So are the British and the American.
Good evening to you, George Galloway.
Good evening.
I hope you're not going to do the usual thing and cut me off halfway.
Well, I'm always glad to hear you, Ronnie, so let's see how we get on.
I'm sure that we will. Right, first of all, you told a downright lie.
Well, that's a good start, Ronnie. I hope you're going to be able to justify that.
I'm going to justify it. You said that during the 6-month ceasefire, no rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. Is that correct?
I said that Hamas had a 6-month ceasefire and didn't fire a single rocket.
No, you're totally wrong there, George. It's a well-known fact they did fire rockets, not a lot, but they did fire rockets. And also, apart from Hamas, we let the other group, Islamic Jihad, fire rockets into Israel.
Yeah.
People did get hurt.
Well, you know, when the IRA had a ceasefire and the real IRA or the continuity IRA broke the ceasefire against the wishes of the IRA, we didn't blame the IRA. We kept on talking and we reached a peace agreement, Ronnie.
Right. Now, can I continue? That's one point I want to make. The second point is this.
It didn't quite justify your opening billing, though, Ronnie, did it? That I told a downright lie.
Now, let me tell you something else, George, and you know this for a fact. 3 years ago, Ariel Sharon, who was no friend of yours, gave up the Gaza Strip completely when he was the Prime Minister of Israel.
Unfortunately, they murdered 225 people in that Gaza Strip that they gave up just this afternoon, Ronnie.
But
can
why?
we, Ronnie,
Ronnie,
Ronnie, it's a very intriguing phrase you use, gave up. When you give up something, that implies that you've done a favour to the person that you've given it up to. In fact, as you know, this land was held for 40 years, illegally, and by violent military occupation.
But George, the whole point is this, it was given up, and they hoped that they would bring a better life for the Palestinians there, to use the word of Ariel Sharon.
Well, why then did the 6-month ceasefire, why was it accompanied by a siege and blockade which was so severe that not me, Ronnie, not Harold Pinter, not Michael Rosen, but the United Nations described as the gravest humanitarian problem in the world? Why was that 6-month ceasefire accompanied by a siege?
Now, can I continue?
Well, you're going to answer me.
Well, let me, you answer me first of all. Why, when the Israelis gave up the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians, the first thing they did was they destroyed the synagogue, then they destroyed all the property that Israel left, and then they fired rockets into Israel? That's what
I so wonder why they destroyed the property that Israel left, Ronnie. Look, Ronnie, for 40 years, 41 now, Israel has illegally and violently and militarily occupied the territory it seized in the Six-Day War in 1967. 16 years ago, under the Oslo Agreement, the Israeli Prime Minister, President Arafat, under the auspices of President Clinton, in front of the entire world, signed the Oslo Agreement, which required Israel to withdraw from the Palestinian territories, to grant the establishment of a Palestinian state, and to solve the problem of the now millions of Palestinian refugees. That hasn't happened 16 years later, Ronnie, has it?
No, because I'll tell you why, because Yasser Arafat broke the agreement.
Well, you see, I'm glad you said that in one way, because, of course, it's now de rigueur for people like you, who take this point of view, to blame Hamas. But you've just proved and established from your own mouth that, in fact, not only could Israel not do business with Hamas when they won the election in Palestine, but they couldn't or wouldn't do business with President Arafat either. It's just one thing after another, Ronnie, isn't it? It's just one excuse after another.